Hello, I'm Jeremiah, and I am introducing Violetta. Violetta has put together this wonderful series for the Clearwater Baha'is, and it is today's the 10th, and it's on the passing of the greatest holy leaf and the dispensation of Bahá'u'lláh. I had that correct, right, Violetta? Wonderful. And just a quick introduction to who Violetta is. Violetta is a artist and graphic designer living in Pointe-Noire in the Republic of Congo and is the co-founder with Adib Masumian of the Utterance Project. I'm sorry, I need everyone to mute themselves. Thank you. And sorry, Violetta and Adib have put together the Utterance Project. Violetta is also a researcher, writer.
Jeremiah, sorry. Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. Thank you. So I was saying that Violetta with Adib Masumian created the Utterance Project. Violetta is also a researcher and writer and presenter on Baha'i history. She has given over 50 talks on the Clearwater Baha'is YouTube channel and is the author of 4 online illustrated chronologies on the lives of Baha'u'lláh, the Bab, Abdu'l-Bahá, and this series, Shoghi Effendi. So without any further delay, Violetta, please.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. There you go. We have so much ground to cover today. The years 1932 to 1936 were so momentous in Shoghi Effendi's life. I'm going to just jump in. This is The Guardian, Part 10, 1932 to 1936, the passing of the greatest holy leaf and the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh. This part covers the life of Shoghi Effendi from the age of 36 in 1933 to the age of 39 in 1936. 1892 to 1932, the greatest holy leaf during Abdu'l-Bahá's and Shoghi Effendi's ministries. This section is an homage to the role that the saintly daughter of Baha'u'lláh, the only girl he ever had, played in the roles of the center of the covenant and the guardian of the Baha'i faith. This is the only picture that we have of Shoghi Effendi and the greatest holy leaf together. And this section is called Shoghi Effendi and Bahiyya Hanum, a profound and spiritual love. Shoghi Effendi grew up worshiping Abdu'l-Bahá and the greatest holy leaf. They were his 2 most beloved people in the world. Both the master and Bahiyya Hanum adored him, even when they tried not to show it, to not cause jealousy with the other grandchildren and great nieces and great nephews. Shoghi Effendi was a constant reminder to the greatest holy leaf of her beloved father, because he resembled Baha'u'lláh more closely than he did his grandfather Abdu'l-Bahá. When he was a child, the greatest holy leaf would take Shoghi Effendi's hands in hers and say, "These are like the hands of my father." Ruhiyya Hanum described this celestial love between Shoghi Effendi and the greatest holy leaf, saying that however faithful and tender Shoghi Effendi's relationships were throughout his life with those closest to him, his supreme relationship was with the greatest holy leaf. And the double tragedy of Shoghi Effendi's life was that he was 24 when his grandfather passed away and he became the guardian of the faith. But he was also 24 when he began his guardianship, and Bahiye Khanum was 75. Shoghi Effendi was entering his life, and the greatest holy leaf was slowly moving towards the end of her physical life. Again, Ruhiye Khanum states about the bond between them two. This love the guardian had for the greatest holy leaf, who watched over him for 35 years as far more than a mother, continued to be demonstrated for the remainder of her life. The guardian and the greatest holy leaf after the passing of Abdu'l-Bahá. After the passing of Abdu'l-Bahá, Shoghi Effendi immediately became the center of Bahiye Khanum's life. They had an intimate bond of communion. And in the first 2 years of his ministry, Shoghi Effendi didn't close his letters in the way that we're familiar with. He didn't end with "your true brother." He ended with, "In this fervent plea joins me the greatest holy leaf. The greatest holy leaf and I. The greatest holy leaf desires me to convey. The greatest holy leaf joins me in requesting. The greatest holy leaf joins me in expressing our heartfelt congratulations." And in 1931, Shoghi Effendi sent a cable and signed it simply Bahiye Shoghi. The greatest holy leaf was the guardian's refuge. This is the room of Bahiye Khanum in the house of Abdullah Pasha in Akka. She was a stable, spiritual presence, a refuge of safety and a tower of strength for Shoghi Effendi from the moment he was born. The greatest holy leaf lived on the second floor of the master's house, and Shoghi Effendi lived on the third floor. Shoghi Effendi only ever ate one meal a day, and until he left Haifa in May 1932, Shoghi Effendi ate that single meal of his day on a small table in the greatest holy leaf's bedroom, alone with his great aunt. The greatest holy leaf's handmaid would knock on Shoghi Effendi's door and tell him dinner was ready. And then he would sit facing his beloved great aunt and first serve her plate before helping himself. Whenever the greatest holy leaf heard Shoghi Effendi's footsteps, she would come out of his room and she would take Shoghi Effendi's hand and she would bring him into her room and she would give him whatever she had to eat and ask him to rest for just a few minutes. The greatest holy leaf loved Shoghi Effendi so much, she enjoyed all the little things, watching her great nephew eat, watching him walk away when he went to the shrine. When he was ready to leave to go up the mountain to the shrine of the Bab and the resting place of Abdu'l-Bahá, the greatest leaf accompanied him to the door and would follow him. And then she would say when he left, "Oh, Abdu'l-Bahá, what a guardian you have left behind. He has illumined the world and will continue to shed luster upon it." And in an event reminiscent of Baha'u'lláh standing at the mansion of Bashji and seeing Abdu'l-Bahá coming and say to the people around him, he is coming, go and greet him," the greatest holy leaf would pace at the top of the stairs until she saw the beloved guardian returning from Mount Carmel. And as soon as she saw him, she would say, he is coming. And then she would take him into her room and would lock the door from the inside so they could speak privately. But the greatest holy leaf was a woman of action. She was not just a gentle presence. She was a powerhouse, a spiritual powerhouse. Between 1892 and 1932, Bahiye Khanum was alone in Akka and Haifa during Abdu'l-Bahá's and Shoghi Effendi's absences, and you will be surprised at the amount of time she held the center of the faith. In 1892 and in 1921, the greatest Holy Leaf experienced the two most devastating losses of her life, her father, Baha'u'lláh, and her brother, her adored brother, Abdu'l-Bahá. But at the same time, although she was going through this devastating grief, she found it within herself to be there for the new head of the faith at this time. So in 1892, she was there in Akka when Abdu'l-Bahá had to seek refuge in solitude to come to terms with the mantle of the covenant that had come to rest on his shoulders. And in 1921, for an entire month, she held down the fort while Shoghi Effendi was traveling to Haifa from London. Few people realize that all told, the greatest Holy Leaf single-handedly held the Baha'i World Center, managed the affairs of the Baha'i community in the Holy Land, managed and directed the affairs of the worldwide Baha'i community, managed the crises set forth by the covenant breakers, dealt with the persecutions and martyrdoms in Persia, and received Baha'i pilgrims from east and west during both Abdu'l-Bahā's and Shoghi Effendi's absences for a period of, at the minimum, 7.5 years. But the true figure is probably closer to 8.5 years. These are some of the times when the greatest Holy Leaf was alone at the head of the faith in the Holy Land. In the summer of 1892, for a month, when Abdu'l-Bahá was on the Cave of Elijah on Mount Carmel, between 1895 and 1896, when the parents of Shoghi Effendi were married, Abdu'l-Bahá was in Tiberias. She was there for probably over a month. Abdu'l-Bahā's trip to Beirut in 1886, I can't remember, sorry, scratch that, but he went to Beirut at the invitation of the governor, and we don't know how long he was there. From August 1910 to December 1913, for 3 years and 4 months, during Abdu'l-Bahā's journeys to the West. In 1914, for a month and a half, while Abdu'l-Bahá was in Tiberias. In early 1916, Abdu'l-Bahá traveled to Nazareth. Again, we have no data, but it was probably a few days. From 1916 to 1918, she was alone every single time that Abdu'l-Bahá went to Adasiyyíh and the Jordan Valley to get grain to bring back during the war. And then she was alone for a month after Abdu'l-Bahá died. Then from April to December 1922, when Shoghi Effendi went to Switzerland. And then again for 5 months, 6 months, 5 months, 5 months, 5 months, while Shoghi Effendi traveled to Switzerland in 1924, 1925, 1926, 1927. From summer to October 1929, when Shoghi Effendi traveled overland from Cape Town to Cairo, she was also in Haifa. That was about 5 months. And then from May 1932 until July, when she passed away, Shoghi Effendi was in Switzerland during the last time of her earthly life. But there are at least 4 reasons why all of these data that add up to 7.5 years might be closer to 8.5 years. In 1895, 1896, Abdu'l-Bahá spent an unknown amount of time in Tiberias. He also traveled to Beirut after the ascension of Baha'u'lláh, and we have letters from him to Bahiyyih Hanum about that. We don't know how long he spent there. He also spent several months in the Jordan and Yarmouk Valley, which are difficult to quantify. And there is no data on Shoghi Effendi's trips to Switzerland in 1928, 1930, and 1931, but that does not mean that Shoghi Effendi did not go to Switzerland during that time, and he would always go for a period of about 5 months. Some historians believe that he did travel those years. I'm just going to summarize this section very quickly because I do want to focus on the Guardian. The greatest Holy Leaf was the trusted supporter of Abdu'l-Bahá. It was only because he had the greatest Holy Leaf, his deputy and vicegerent, that he was able to travel for 3 years and leave the shrine of Baha'u'lláh and the Baha'i community in her very capable hands. That is something we don't often think about, is that the only reason he was able to travel is because she was there. She held firm in the face of all this increasing covenant-breaking activity during Abdu'l-Bahā's journeys to the West. Shoghi Effendi described Bahiya Khanum support to Abdu'l-Bahá by saying that she was a trusted and supporter of the peerless branch of Baha'u'lláh and a companion to him beyond compare, his competent deputy, his representative and vicegerent, with none equal to her. If you want to have an idea of the tenderness and trust and respect between Abdu'l-Bahá and his beloved, adored sister Bahiya Khanum, all you have to do is pick up Leaves of the Twin Divine Trees, go to the chapter on Bahiya Khanum, and read the dozens upon dozens of excerpts of his letters to his sister. You will be brought to tears. The greatest holy leaf, chief sustainer of the guardian. When Abdu'l-Bahá passed away, Bahiya Khanum was the only one who had the past experience after the passing of Baha'u'lláh and seeing the shock of her brother Abdu'l-Bahá when he received the mantle of the covenant and was named the center of the covenant, to make these decisions in Shoghi Effendi's absence. She had the pedigree. She was the daughter of Baha'u'lláh, sister of Abdu'l-Bahá. She had the authority to take the reins and make decisions, such as where should Abdu'l-Bahá be buried. To Shoghi Effendi, the greatest holy leaf offered comfort and respite. She had lived through 3 decades of Abdu'l-Bahā's ministry, start to finish, and knew the superhuman pressures he was under better than anyone. She was his constant steward, his sole supporter, and she offered the guardian that last link with his beloved grandfather. Shoghi Effendi confirmed in several of his letters the similarity between Bahiya Khanum and Abdu'l-Bahā's spiritual qualities. And this is a very important excerpt because we need to have an understanding of Bahiya Khanum not as a quiet, suffering presence, but as a figure of not only authority, but strength and steadfastness, and a woman of action. This is what Shoghi Effendi says. To me, standing in so dire need of the vitalizing grace of God, she was the living symbol of many an attribute I had learned to admire in Abdu'l-Bahá. She was to me she was a continual reminder of his inspiring personality, his calm resignation, of his munificence and magnanimity. To me, she was an incarnation of his winsome graciousness, of his all-encompassing tenderness and love. What makes the greatest holy leaf so exceptional is that both Abdu'l-Bahá and Shoghi Effendi knew how much they owed her and how much they depended on her. They showered her with praise during her life. Shoghi Effendi referred to Bahiya Khanum as my chief sustainer, my most affectionate comforter, the joy and inspiration of my life. But of course, Bahiya Khanum was advancing in age. And between the 25th of October, 1929 and March 1932, Shoghi Effendi showed through his letters that he was increasingly aware of Bahiya Khanum's frailty. And this is a photograph of Bahiya Khanum in her very advanced old age. She was always very slight, and she was never healthy again after the exiles in the middle of winter from Istanbul to Edirne, and for the sea journey from Edirne and Gallipoli through Egypt to the Holy Land. She was never fully healthy again. On the 25th of October, 1929, the Guardian explained to the Baha'is of North America that the greatest holy leaf's last earthly wish was the restarting of the work of the Mother Temple of the West in Wilmette. And he said that she was now in the evening of her life. with deepening shadows caused by failing eyesight and declining strength, swiftly gathering about her, yearning to hear as the one remaining solace in her swiftly ebbing life, the news of the resumption of the work on the edifice, the glories of which she has from the lips of Abdu'l-Bahá himself learned to admire. And this brings us to 15 July 1932, the passing of the greatest Holy Leaf. Shoghi Effendi was in Interlaken, Switzerland, when he learned of the passing of the greatest Holy Leaf. He had left some time in May 1932 for his regular 4 or 5 months stay in Switzerland, his annual rest and recuperation, which to Shoghi Effendi was 42-kilometer walks on mountain passes, sleeping 5 hours a night in a room with no heating. Before leaving, Shoghi Effendi had left instructions regarding the exact spot on Mount Carmel where Bahiyyih Hanum was to be buried if she died while she was away. His instructions showed his infallibility. It was in Interlaken, 2 months after his arrival in the sheltering shadow of his beloved mountains, that he received the second most devastating news of his life, after the news of Abdu'l-Bahā's ascension. On 15 July 1932, the greatest Holy Leaf had passed away while in Haifa. At 1 in the morning, the same time that Abdu'l-Bahá had passed away. She had contracted bronchitis at a time when she was extremely weak and frail, and all the women of the family, including the mother of Ali Naqshbandi, kept a 24-hour watch on her until she passed away. The greatest Holy Leaf had prepared her own passing. She had prepared her burial shroud, a pair of white socks, a white scarf, a white handkerchief, and a white dress made of inexpensive material, and she had wrapped everything in paper. She was buried later on the same day she passed away on Mount Carmel in the exact spot which had been indicated by the guardian. It was in choosing to bury the greatest Holy Leaf on Mount Carmel in such close proximity to the shrine of the Bab that Shoghi Effendi took the first step in building the future Baha'i World Center, which would later accommodate the seat of the Universal House of Justice. After her passing, Shoghi Effendi sent one cable announcing the devastating news. Greatest Holy Leaf's immortal spirit winged its flight great beyond. Countless lovers her saintly life in east and west seized with pangs of anguish, plunged in unutterable sorrow. Humanity shall ere long recognize its irreparable loss. Our beloved faith, well nigh crushed by the devastating blow of Abdu'l-Bahā's unexpected ascension, now laments passing, last remnant of Bahá'u'lláh, its most exalted member. Holy Family cruelly divested its most precious great adorning. I, for my part, bewail sudden removal of my sole earthly sustainer, the joy and solace of my life. Her sacred remains will repose vicinity holy shrines. So grievous a bereavement necessitates suspension for 9 months throughout Baha'i world, every manner religious festivity. Inform local assemblies and groups, hold befitting manner memorial gatherings, extol a life so laden, sacred experiences, so rich imperishable memories, advise holding additional commemoration service of strictly devotional character, auditorium, Mashrikul Asghar. The next step was for Shoghi Effendi to build a suitable memorial for the greatest Holy Leaf and immediately after sending his letters to the Baha'i world, he traveled from Switzerland to Italy to commission a befitting, magnificent memorial monument. This is a photograph of the funeral cortege of the greatest holy leaf on Mount Carmel, approaching the shrine of the Bab. And this is a photograph of the Feast of the Poor in Haifa, in the greatest holy leaf's name. Look at how beautiful that table is. Look at how long it is. How many people are seated at it. July 1932, after the passing of the greatest holy leaf. 17 July 1932, the Guardian's eulogy for the greatest holy leaf. This is a very, very major letter. Shoghi Effendi pours out his heart and addresses the devastating grief and sorrow that he feels, her station in history, the story of her life and sufferings, her self-sacrificing nature, her role during Abdu'l-Bahā's journeys to the West, and even quotes from a tablet revealed by Abdu'l-Bahá, where he describes the greatest holy leaf as my honored and distinguished sister. The last 5 paragraphs in English are written in the traditional Persian fashion, where Shoghi Effendi addresses himself in the language of prayer to the greatest holy leaf, gazing through tears at her blue, deep eyes, remembering her, cherishing her, asking her to convey a message to Abdu'l-Bahá, and begging prayers for the guardian of the faith of Baha'u'lláh and the Bahá'ís. The letter of Shoghi Effendi was 18 pages long. So 16 pages long. And it's really, really beautiful. You can see here the left-handed writing of Shoghi Effendi writing with his right hand. And it's immensely touching. And we learn things about the greatest holy leaf that we never knew before. They come out in this letter. For example, when she was a teenager, from time to time, Baha'u'lláh in Baghdad, at the height of the covenant breaking, would send the greatest holy leaf on very delicate, important, secret missions that no other girl could or would perform. And she responded to these missions with joy. Shoghi Effendi does not go into detail about what these missions were exactly, but this is he's telling us about her service from her teenage years to 2 of the central figures of the faith, Baha'u'lláh and Abdu'l-Bahá, and he talks about her role in his life. Because this letter is very long, 16 pages long, I've put it in the chronology, and I really encourage you to go to the chronology, part 10, and read it, because it is an absolutely moving and profound experience. Of course, Shoghi Effendi, being the guardian, could not address the station of Bahiya Khanum, which was a station no other woman hath surpassed. He called her the outstanding heroine of the Baha'i dispensation, and stated in no uncertain terms that Bahiya Khanum not only evinced the qualities that he loved the most about Abdu'l-Bahá, but she also personified the attributes of Baha'u'lláh. And of course, you know that Baha'u'lláh gave her the title Bahiyye as a feminine version of Baha. So he gave her his own name. During all thy days, from thine earliest years until the close of thy life, thou didst personify the attributes of thy father, the matchless, the mighty. He referred to the greatest holy leaf as the well-beloved sister of Abdu'l-Bahá, the leaf that has sprung from the pre-existent root, the fragrance of Baha'u'llah's shining robe, and elevated by Baha'u'lláh himself to a station such as none other woman has surpassed. Bahiyyáh Hanum was the outstanding heroine of the Baha'i dispensation. This is a photograph of her in 1890. She was taken while Bahiyyáh Hanum's father Baha'u'lláh was still alive. When Bahiyyáh Hanum came of age, she made the decision to not marry, and she implored her father to give her this wish. She chose to devote her entire life to Baha'u'lláh, Abdu'l-Bahá, and her mother Adasiyyíh Hanum, as well as the faith of Baha'u'lláh and humankind. For 86 years, she quietly and passionately served each of them. She served the supreme manifestation of God for this age, the center of the covenant of Baha'u'lláh, and the guardian of the faith of Baha'u'lláh. No one really knew her intimately because she had a quiet, reserved character and she never spoke excessively. So it was easy for the thousands of pilgrims who came and went to just see her as a saintly woman, but not really have access to the depth and the complexity of her character. Shoghi Effendi, from the moment of her passing to the time of his own death, worked very, very hard to get the immensity of her life across, to share the extraordinary qualities that the greatest holy leaf had, and to highlight her unique place in history. The fact that she played a major role in influencing the course of important events during the heroic and formative ages. She was the only one of the family of Baha'u'lláh, of his children, to live through both. The heroic age ended with the passing of Abdu'l-Bahá, and it began with the ministry of Shoghi Effendi. And Bahiyyáh Hanum was alive during the heroic age in the ministry of Baha'u'lláh and Abdu'l-Bahá, and during the formative age during the guardianship. Shoghi Effendi loved the greatest holy leaf with a burning passion and lent his formidable pen to give her so many exalted titles. The most exalted, the pure, the holy, the immaculate, the bright shining leaf, the remnant of Baha, the trust of Baha, the eternal fruit, the one last remembrance of the holy tree, that mine of faithfulness, the orb of the heaven of eternal glory, a torch of tender love, the leaf. It goes on and on and on. There are at least 49 of these qualifications. Between 1932 and 1957, Shoghi Effendi remembered Bahiyyáh Hanum constantly. These are relics of some of the items that belonged to Bahiyyáh Hanum, which were placed by Shoghi Effendi in the international archives. When Mary Maxwell came on pilgrimage, Shoghi Effendi told her something interesting. He said that the greatest holy leaf was not, in fact, the most accurate translation for Baha'u'llah's title for Bahiyyáh Hanum. In Arabic, the title is Waraqi-ul-Ya, Waraqi-ul-Ya, which literally and more accurately translates as the most exalted leaf. The word holy is not in the original Arabic. The greatest holy leaf surrounded Shoghi Effendi's life after her passing. He moved the armchair that he used to sit in when he visited his great aunt into his room, and he used that armchair until the end of his life. He filled his bedroom with photographs of her from her youth to her old age, as well as beautiful photographs of her monument. Her memory to him became an ennobling influence amid the wreckage of his sadly shaken world. She became his refuge after her passing, as she had been in his life. He decorated the international archives with illuminated tablets revealed by Baha'u'lláh in the greatest holy leaf's honor, photographs of her monument and relics from her life. In 1939, 7 years after her passing, when he reinterred the remains of Adasiyyíh Khanum and Mirza Mehdi on Mount Carmel, he cabled the Baha'i world saying that the cherished wish of the greatest holy leaf was fulfilled. This is a beautiful article from Mirat al-Sherk, dated 20 July 1932. The paper is from Jerusalem, and it was provided for this chronology by Dr. Nejati Alkan, and it reports the passing of Bahiyyih Khanum to show you how important of a personality she was, that her death was reported in a local paper. November 1932 to January 1933, Baha'is imprisoned in Turkey. But we begin with another story. In 1932, George Adam Henke returns to Bulgaria. This is George Adam Henke here, and his wife Lena holding a portrait of Abdu'l-Bahá in Sofia, Bulgaria in 1932. George Adam Henke was born in a Crimean German family on a prosperous farm in Ukraine in 1878. He had a very difficult childhood filled with disease, poverty, and famine. But through sheer force of will and his brilliant mind, he became a linguist. He married Lena in 1901, and in 1920, they became Baha'is through Alma Knobloch. George Henke was called upon in 1931 to go and help Marian Jack, who was at that point the only Baha'i pioneer left in Sofia, Bulgaria. He visited Vienna, he learned Bulgarian, he was very gifted with languages, and he was a great help to Marian Jack, who did not speak Bulgarian. Bulgaria at the time also, the people spoke Russian, and so did he. So he was invaluable. He loved Esperanto and spoke Esperanto. He attended an Esperanto conference at Stara Zagora, about 230 kilometers east of Sofia. And then in 1932, he had so much success with his first visit that the Guardian asked him to return. So he went to Varna, which was 400 kilometers east of Sofia, and he renewed his acquaintance with his Esperanto friends and revived a little bit their knowledge about the Baha'i faith. 23rd of November, 1932, George Adam Henke becomes the first European martyr. This is George Adam Henke, and these are from left to right, Hand of the Cause Martha Root and Marian Jack. Martha Root and Marian Jack at his grave. George had a wonderful time in Bulgaria and was constantly talking to people in his wonderful potpourri of languages that he spoke. Nothing distracted him from teaching work, and all he wanted was to become an effective teacher of the faith. His devotion to Shoghi Effendi was deeply touching. But suddenly, on the night of the 23rd of November, 1932, he was suddenly struck down by an unexpected heart attack. While he was in the hospital, he taught the faith to a young Russian woman, and until past midnight, he was giving advice and counsels to a young Bulgarian man. After a short half hour of discomfort, he said some prayers, said the remover of difficulties, and with the invocation of the Bab on his lips, he passed away. He was laid to rest in the Sofia cemetery, and all those who'd met George Adam Henke spoke of the purity of his character and his just wonderful life and personality. In 1956, the Guardian elevated him to the rank of martyr. He said, before the days when the term pioneer was even in use, dear Mr. Henke, who sacrificed his life in the service of the faith with such an exemplary spirit of devotion that the Guardian felt impelled to call him the first European Martyr of the Faith. George Adam Henke received the everlasting honor of becoming the first European Baha'i martyr 1 year before Keith Ransom Kehler was felled in her path of service in Persia, passed away, and became the first American Baha'i martyr in 1933. 14 January 1933, The Guardian's tribute to the Greatest Holy Leaf. 6 months after the Greatest Holy Leaf's passing, Shoghi Effendi sent a photograph of the Greatest Holy Leaf and the most significant tablets that Baha'u'lláh and Abdu'l-Bahá had ever revealed regarding her station to the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States, asking them to create pamphlets from this information. In his cover letter, Shoghi Effendi stated that these passages disclosed the nature of that mystic bond, which on the one hand united her with the spirit of her Almighty Father, and on the other linked her so closely with her glorious brother, the perfect exemplar of that spirit. Just 10 days later, 13 days later, 40 Baha'is were imprisoned in Istanbul and Adana. So this is what happens when you write a chronology, is you move from something so touching and elevated to opposition to the faith and crisis. And just a few days later, after this tribute to Bahiyyih Hanum, in January 1933, the Turkish Baha'is were once again imprisoned. The attention of the Guardian was on every part of the globe. The Turkish government had already come down on them 5 years earlier in 1928. The Guardian cabled the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States, explaining to them the situation and who had been arrested, and asked the National Assembly to cable authorities and to approach the State Department. And the Guardian also himself cabled His Excellency İsmet Pasha, the Prime Minister of Turkey in Ankara, who is this man that you see here. That's İsmet Pasha. The worldwide Baha'i community appealed to the Turkish authorities, and on the 5th of March, a couple of months later, the Guardian told the American Assembly, Istanbul friends acquitted, 53 still imprisoned. Then the next month, in April, he had wonderful news saying Adana friends released, advise, convey appreciation, Turkish ambassador. This was typical of Shoghi Effendi. He always remembered to thank the people that had done things for the faith. He was a very thoughtful and very sensitive person. February to March 1933, the Most Great House of Baha'u'lláh. And again, chronology, we begin with another story, which is between the 26th of February, 1933, Shoghi Effendi and the Grand Duke Alexander, this fabulous looking man with this extraordinary mustache here. Shoghi Effendi, in the first 10 years of his ministry, entertained a correspondence, lengthy correspondence, with the Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich of Russia. From the tone of Shoghi Effendi's letters, it is clear that he really liked the Grand Duke a great deal, and he addressed him as my true brother in the service of God, my dear brother in the love of God, and he encouraged the Grand Duke in all his different interests of different movements. And in a letter to Shoghi Effendi, the Grand Duke wrote, I must confess to you, my dear brother and fellow worker, that in my modest work, occasionally I feel discouraged. So it was a very intimate correspondence because the Grand Duke confided in Shoghi Effendi, and Shoghi Effendi alleviated his friend's anxiety with his characteristic kindness. But then the Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich of Russia passed away on the 26th of February, 1933. And my purpose in putting this vignette here, which is a very short vignette about an exchange of letters between European royalty and Shoghi Effendi, is to give a different idea of who Shoghi Effendi was. He had correspondences with lots of people. 18th of March, 1933, the Most Great House of Baha'u'lláh in Baghdad. This is a photograph of King Faisal I of Iraq. Martha Root met with King Faisal, And King Faisal said, oh, no, no, no, justice will be served with the most great house. Don't worry about it. But he was sort of a weak person, and the Shia put pressures on him. So he never followed through with his promise to do something about the most great house of Baha'u'lláh. The Baha'is' rightful claim to ownership had the support of the League of Nations. Still, King Faisal wasn't able to sway public opinion in his own country. And in 1932, a compromise was offered to turn the house into a school, a dispensary, or public gardens. The Baha'is agreed, the Shia refused. They pleaded their case once again at the 22nd session of the Permanent Mandates Commission of the League of Nations. But after 5 years of deliberation, on the 18th of March, 1933, the Iraqi government decided to protect the Most Great House as part of an urban development plan. And even though the Baha'is tried to plead their cases, it was to no avail. 1923 to 1933, 10 years of efforts to win back the Most Great House of Baha'u'lláh. This is what the Fourth Assembly of the League of Nations in Geneva looked like. This is where the case was pleaded several years in a row for the Baha'is. In God Passes By, Shoghi Effendi summarized what exactly happened with the Most Great House in Baghdad. And it's really interesting because the final words of Shoghi Effendi on the subject show that he did not consider these 10 years in vain, and he did not consider them a failure at all. He said, suffice it to say that despite these interminable delays, protests, and evasions, and the manifest failures of the authorities concerned to implement the recommendations made by the Council and the League of Nations and the Permanent Mandate Commission, the publicity achieved for the faith by this memorable litigation and the defense of its cause, the cause of truth and justice, by the world's highest tribunal, have been such as to excite the wonder of its friends and to fill with consternation its enemies. Publicity, publicity, publicity. The way the Guardian saw it was that, of course, these 10 years of appeals to the League of Nations and the Permanent Mandates Commission did not come to fruition. But for 10 years, the faith received publicity from those events. On the 21st of April, 1933, Shoghi Effendi wrote a long letter called America and the Most Great Peace. And I started with a little collage of the Station of America and the writings of the Bab, Baha'u'lláh, and Abdu'l-Bahá. This is New York during the time of the Bab. This is New York during the time of Baha'u'lláh. This is New York during the time of Abdu'l-Bahá. America, as you well know, holds a special place in the Baha'i dispensation. The Bab, in his very first revealed work, Qayyumul Asma, called upon the people of the West to leave their cities and ensure the triumph of his cause. Baha'u'lláh, in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, addressed the rulers of the American continent. Abdu'l-Bahá's tablets of the divine plan were addressed to the American believers. It was in 1893 at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago that Baha'u'llah's name was spoken aloud. It was in Chicago in 1894 that Thornton Chase became the very first American Baha'i. And Abdu'l-Bahá conferred on the American people the title of Apostles of Baha'u'lláh. And so now the Station of America and the writings of Shoghi Effendi, and this is New York City during the guardianship. Shoghi Effendi wrote that the American people became the objects of Abdu'l-Bahá's tender solicitude, the center of his hopes, the recipient of his promises, and the beneficiary of his teaching. The foremost teacher of the faith during the ministry of Abdu'l-Bahá and Shoghi Effendi was Martha Root, an American. The Guardian described Americans as the children of Abdu'l-Bahá, indefatigable irresistibly advancing, majestically unfolding American Baha'i community, singled out by the Almighty for such a unique measure of favor, and that the divine plan conferred on them was a divine world mission, which was their sacred birthright of the American followers of Baha'u'lláh. He also called them the executors of Abdu'l-Bahá's will, the champion builders of Baha'u'llah's embryonic world order. Now, this section are more ecstatic, wonderful, extraordinary, beautiful, elevating statements about America. And for that reason, because I just shared some, I'm going to skip this section. But The Guardian was not just, of course, so many of his letters were written to North America, but The Guardian was the world's guardian. We have to remember that. He wasn't just focused on America. These are Baha'is of the world during the ministry of The Guardian. We have Baha'is in Esslingen, Germany here. We have Baha'is in Japan here with Mr. Auger in a kimono. We have Aziz Yazdi seated left with a hand of the cause, Martha Root in Iran. We have Martha Root in Melbourne, Australia. And then we have, again, Martha Root with Baha'is in Hamadan. Martha Root is everywhere. She's in like 1, 2, 3 photos. The Guardian paid close attention to the development of the faith in Persia, in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, India, Burma, all of the communities in Europe, the 4 regional national assemblies in Africa, the countries in Central and South America, and all of them got individual messages from him. So Shoghi Effendi was always everyone's guardian. 21 of April, 1933, America and the Most Great Peace. America and the Most Great Peace is a 23-page letter, and it outlines the American Baha'i community's prodigious achievements in service to the faith. But it also addresses the divinely ordained destiny of America, the part that it's been called to play in world history, and recalls Abdu'l-Bahá's historic journeys to their shores 21 years ago. Shoghi Effendi casts his unerring panoramic glance on the first 40 years of the faith in America, since the declaration of Thornton Chase in 1894. He speaks about the first Western pilgrims that arrived in 1898 in Akka to meet Abdu'l-Bahá, and then he lavishly praises recent victories won by American pioneers and American teachers, such as Martha Root's extraordinary teaching and proclamation, which resulted in Queen Marie of Romania becoming a Baha'i, Keith Ransom Keller's aid to the Persian Baha'is. And I'm just going to read a few sentences of America and the Most Great Peace, because I always want to give you an idea of the language of Shoghi Effendi, because it's so extraordinary. This is the 1893 Parliament of World Religions, where Baha'u'llah's name were spoken out loud in America for the first time, 1 year after his passing. Most prized and beloved brethren, as we look back upon the 40 years which have passed since the auspicious rays of the Baha'i revelation first warmed and illuminated the American continent, we find that they may well fall into 4 distinct periods, each culminating in an event of such significance as to constitute a milestone along the road leading the American believers toward their promised victory. I'm just going to summarize the four distinct periods. The first period is the first of these 4 decades, from 1893 to 1903, is a process of slow and steady fermentation. And it culminates in the pilgrimage of the American disciples to the shrine of Baha'u'lláh. The 10 years that follow, 1903, 1913, cleansed and energized the bodies of the early pioneers of the faith. And it was the climax, of course, was the visit of Abdu'l-Bahá to America. The third period, 1913-1923, is a period of quiet and uninterrupted consolidation. Which culminates with the will and testament of Abdu'l-Bahá. The remaining 10 years, 1923-1933, distinguished by further internal development and a notable expansion of the international activities, witnessed the completion of the superstructure of the Mashriq al-Asghar. So that's the event. A year after Bahiyyih Hanum's passing, August 1933, the monument in honor of the Greatest Holy Leaf. This is the resting place of the Greatest Holy Leaf. It is a stunning, stunning picture. It is the only building on the upper part of Mount Carmel. Now, of course, we have the International Teaching Center here, the Universal House of Justice seat here, Center of the Study of the Texts here, International Archives here. By August 1933, the Guardian had completed the Greatest Holy Leaf's monument on Mount Carmel, the very first memorial in what would come to be known as the Monument Gardens, destined to be the heart of the Baha'i World Center's administrative buildings. But of course, the Monument Gardens are at the heart, but the focal point is the monument of Bahiyyih Hanum. She is around which all of the buildings of the Ark are built. The monument was built of the best Carrara marble from Italy. It's been used since Roman times for the most precious sculptures. Shoghi Effendi's design inspiration for the columned monument undoubtedly finds its roots in Greek and Roman antiquity, but he reinterpreted a classic feature, columns, which he surmounted with a dome, into a meaningful spiritual homage of the Baha'i administrative order. The monument is composed of three distinctive parts: 3 circular steps, pillars resting around the perimeter of the base, and around a dome crowning the monument. The Guardian would always compare the administrative order to the Greatest Holy Leaf's monument. The first step was the election of delegates to the National Convention. The second step was the election of national spiritual assemblies. The third step was the election of the Universal House of Justice by the national spiritual assemblies. The pillars symbolized national spiritual assemblies, and the dome symbolized the Universal House of Justice. No element of the monument and no element of the Baha'i administrative order could be erected unless each element was erected in order. Elections, and then institutions, and then the supreme institution. This is a photograph of the Greatest Holy Leaf's monument seen from above. So the opposite of here. So the photograph is taken from here, above. And of course, we come to the magnificent inscription in Arabic in gilded letters, gilded carved letters around the base of the dome. This is one of Baha'u'llah's Baha'u'llah's most exquisite tribute to the Greatest Holy Leaf. And this is what he says: "This is my testimony for her who hath heard my voice and draw nigh unto me. Verily, she is a leaf that has sprung forth from this pre-existent root. She hath revealed herself in my name and tasted the sweet savors of my holy my wondrous pleasure. At one time, we gave her to drink from my honeyed mouth. At another, caused her to partake of my mighty, my luminous kauthar. This is an Arabic word for fountain. Upon her rest the glory of my name and the fragrance of my shining robe. Once the Greatest Holy Leaf's monument was completed, Shoghi Effendi had a beautiful photograph taken and sent to many national spiritual assemblies that published them in their journals and Bahá'í News. He also sent the beautiful photograph to a special list of individuals to whom he wanted to present his tender and touching souvenir. One of the most touching aspects of Shoghi Effendi's attention to detail with regard of the monument of the Greatest Holy Leaf was a phone call that he placed to the engineer of the project, asking him to make absolutely sure that when the head pillar was put in place, that that head pillar faced directly in the direction of the shrine of Baha'u'lláh and not the city of Akka. This, my friends, is a photograph that the Guardian took of the Greatest Holy Leaf's monument. It was published as the frontispiece of the Baha'i World, Volume 5, 1930, 1932. I think it's really wonderful because the photograph is really well balanced. You know, you have cypresses on each side. The monument is perfectly center, and there's just wonderful framing. It's not too low, it's not too high. And then you have this beautiful clouded sky above. It's a really stunning photograph. He was a very talented photographer. October 1933, Keith Ransom Keller's mission to Persia. This is Keith Ransom Keller with Baha'is in Persia, don't know which city, in 1933. So Keith Ransom Keller was an American Baha'i lecturer. She was a world traveler. She was one of the most outstanding speakers of her time. She was a woman of outstanding capacity and ability. Shoghi Effendi had clearly seen her qualities, and he decided to give her a very special assignment. So while she was traveling in India in 1932, Shoghi Effendi summoned her to Haifa. Her special assignment was to go to Iran, to Persia, and to succeed where Persian Baha'is had failed on two related tasks. One is to petition Reza Shah Pahlavi to allow Baha'i literature into the country, and two, to free the Persian Baha'is of the limitations imposed upon them for so many decades. For weeks and weeks in Haifa, Shoghi Effendi personally tutored Keith Ransom Keller on Islam, on Persia, and at the time, the Greatest Holy Leaf was still alive. And so she said farewell to Keith, and she folded her tenderly in her arms and told her, "When you are come to Persia, I want you to give my love to every Baha'i in that land, to the men the same as the women. And when you reach the holy city of Tehran, enter it in my name and teach there in my name." Keith Ransom Keller spent a year in Persia trying to accomplish her twofold goal: allow literature to enter, free the limitations on Baha'is. She wrote 7 long letters to Reza Shah. She received no reply. The Shah refused to meet her. She was unable to accomplish either of her goals. But although her primary mission had failed through no fault of her own, Keith Ransom Keller was an absolutely thundering success for the Baha'is of Persia, because they were reinvigorated by her visit. She was such an amazing speaker, and she was so wonderful. And they were so isolated from the rest of the world. She brought so much news, and she'd just been tutored for months by the Guardian. So you can just imagine all the wonderful things that she would have been able to say. And she stirred the Persian community into a new awareness and had a very historic impact on them. They understood better the guardianship, their future mission, and their immediate duties. So throughout her, Keith Ransom Keller's journey through Persia, here is a photo of Keith Ransom Keller with Gloria, who would later become Gloria Feyzi, and her brother, Manuchir. Keith Ransom Keller, yeah. Or no, wait. Hand of the Cause, Keith Ransom Keller seated at left, with Rahmatullah Khan Alai standing at right, and Najme standing at left, with Gloria Feyzi here on the right. She's a child. She would later become Gloria Feyzi, the wife of the Hand of the Cause, Abul Kazim Feyzi. So while she was traveling in Persia, she was met by 250 Baha'is, 35 kilometers out of Kashan, who escorted her to the city. For the next 4 days, she spoke in various places. She went on teaching trips. She journeyed to the village of Aran, where she met the governor, the chief of police, the director of the municipal council, and other high officials. After several more speaking engagements and teaching events, Keith Ransom Keller arrived in Esfahan on the 7th of October, 1933. On 8 October, she addressed meetings of men and women, defended the face against the recent attacks in Persian papers. On the 9th of October, she visited the governor of Isfahan in his home, as well as the head of the telegraph department and the chief of police. 23rd of October, 1933, first and distinguished American martyr, the passing of Hand of the Cause, Keith Ransom Keller, during her mission to Persia. Now, the day after meeting the governor and the police and the telegraph guy, on the 10th of October, 1933, Keith Ransom Keller fell ill and was initially diagnosed with measles, a terrifyingly deadly illness, which we have managed to eradicate from the planet. She was attended by Najmiye and Rahmatullah Khan Alai, who we've seen their picture up here, Najmiye and Rahmatullah, brother and sister. Her doctor was Dr. Adasiyyíh from Isfahan, but her condition worsened and her diagnosis changed from smallpox and dysentery. The smallpox had a fatality rate of 30%. And shortly before her death, in one of her last diary entries, Keith Ransom Keller wrote, "I have fallen, though I never faltered. Months of effort with nothing accomplished is the record that confronts me. If anyone in the future should be interested in this thwarted adventure of mine, he alone can say, whether near or far, from the seemingly impregnable heights of complaisance and indifference, my tired old body fell. The smoke and din of battle are today too dense for me to ascertain whether I moved forward or was slain in my tracks." Keith Ransom Keller passed away in Esfahan on the 23rd of October, 1933. 5 days later, the Guardian elevated her to the rank of Hand of the Cause and first American Bahá'í Martyr. The 1930s, the change in tone in Shoghi Effendi's writings. This is just an abstract illustration of waves and beach, just to show the change in tone of Shoghi Effendi's writing. Ruhiya Khanum said that by the 1930s, something of the tender and trusting youth has gone forever. And so 10 years into his ministry, the Guardian's writings and letters, their tone changed, and he emerged as a literary giant, his pen transformed into a mighty sword. In the first 10 years of his writings, Ruhiya Khanum affirms that one could sense a combination of modesty and self-effacement, perhaps even an echo of his whole soul's tremendous pain at the tragic loss of his grandfather. But she says that in the 1930s, these elements were replaced with a change that showed himself as his writings being imbued with self-assurance, strength and self-confidence of a general waging a spiritual war. Ruhiya Khanum saw this change in the Guardian's tone in 3 places. First, in the newfound power with which Shoghi Effendi communicated his directives to the Baha'i world. Second, in the way that he began shaping the fledgling American Baha'i administrative order, welding diverse and different communities into a unified whole. And third, she saw this change in the beauty and self-confidence of his literary style that steadily became more majestic and eloquent as the decades of his ministry went by. And so now we come to an extremely important section. February 1934, the Dispensation of Bahá'u'lláh. To be specific, the 8th of February, 1934. The Great Depression began in the United States in 1929, but its effects spread around the entire world like wildfire, destabilizing societies and pushing political movements to extremes. Extreme left, communism, extreme right, right-wing Nazism, and Mussolini and Franco and all those things. The crisis lasted 10 years, during which fascism and communism rose. In 1934, in the midst of this economic, social, and political turmoil and confusion, Shoghi Effendi wrote perhaps the weightiest letter of his ministry, 1 year only after his majestic America and the Most Great Peace. This work of tremendous importance is called the Dispensation of Bahá'u'lláh. It is a treatise in the form of a letter that was to transcend all letters. When the Dispensation of Bahá'u'lláh burst onto the scene of Baha'i communities worldwide, it was a watershed event. When Ruhiya Khanum first read this letter, she was 23 years old. She was still Mary Maxwell. She described the effect of the Dispensation of Bahá'u'lláh on her soul as a life-changing experience of instant awareness. I remember when I first read it, I had the most extraordinary feeling, as if the whole universe suddenly expanded around me, and I was looking out into its dazzling, star-filled immensity. All the frontiers of our understanding flew outwards. The glory of this cause and the true station of the central figures were revealed to us, and we were never the same again. The Dispensation of Bahá'u'lláh lays out like gems the essential truths of the Baha'i faith, the basic doctrinal verities that are fundamental to the cause of Baha'u'lláh. With regards to Baha'u'llah's New World Order, Shoghi Effendi conceived of the Dispensation of Baha'u'lláh as an invaluable supplement to the Kitab-i-Iqan, Baha'u'llah's Book of Certitude, and Abdu'l-Bahá's Will and Testament. So the Guardian himself, speaking about the Dispensation of Bahá'u'lláh, which he wrote, elevated the importance of the Dispensation of Bahá'u'lláh as an adjunct to the Kitab-i-Iqan and to the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Bahá. So the first section of the Dispensation of Baha'u'lláh deals with the station of Baha'u'lláh. There are 4 sections, and you're just going to see the humility of Shoghi Effendi in the titles of these 4 sections. The first section is Baha'u'lláh. The second section is the Bab. The third section is Abdu'l-Bahá. And the fourth section is the administrative order. Notice there is no guardian section. That was Shoghi Effendi. The first section expounds on the station of Baha'u'lláh, Shoghi Effendi categorically stating that a manifestation of God is not an incarnation of God. He is not God made flesh. Shoghi Effendi includes luminous excerpts from the writings of Baha'u'lláh and the Bab on the greatness of Baha'u'llah's station. But perhaps this early description of Baha'u'llah's grandeur is a befitting example of the heights of eloquence which Shoghi Effendi reaches in this unique and unprecedented letter. And it's very short, dominating the entire range of this fascinating spectacle towers the incomparable figure of Baha'u'lláh, transcendental in his majesty, serene, awe-inspiring, unapproachably glorious. The second section relates to the Bab and his station as an independent manifestation of God, not just the prophet herald. This is an excerpt. Indeed, the greatness of the Bab consists primarily not in his being the divinely appointed forerunner of so transcendent a revelation, but rather in his having been invested with the powers inherent in the inaugurator of a separate religious dispensation, and in his wielding to a degree unrivaled by the messengers gone before him, the scepter of independent prophethood. Why would Shoghi Effendi say this? Because people probably didn't realize. Probably nobody thought of the Bab as anything other than the forerunner of Baha'u'lláh until the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh changed all of that. The third section is about Abdu'l-Bahá. In this section, Shoghi Effendi dwells on the station of Abdu'l-Bahá, the mystery of God, and acknowledges that understanding the station of Abdu'l-Bahá is a very complicated thing. It would indeed be difficult for us, who stand so close to such a tremendous figure and are drawn by the mysterious power of so magnetic a personality, to obtain a clear and exact understanding of the role and character of one who, not only in the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh, but in the entire field of religious history, fulfills a unique function. He towers in conjunction with Baha'u'lláh and the Bab above the destinies of this infant faith of God from a level to which no individual or body ministering to its needs after him, and for no less than period than a full 1,000 years, can ever hope to rise. And finally, the fourth section of the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh, where of course the guardian is going to very briefly address the guardianship, is the formative age of the faith. And this is really one of the only statements of any kind of length from Shoghi Effendi about the guardianship. Exalted as is the position and as vital the function of the institution of the guardianship in the administrative order of Baha'u'lláh, and staggering as must be the weight of responsibility which it, the guardianship, carries, its importance must, whatever be the language of the will, be in no wise overemphasized. The guardian of the faith must not, under any circumstances, and whatever his merits or his achievements, be exalted to the rank that would make him a co-sharer with Abdu'l-Bahá in the unique position which the center of the covenant occupies. No guardian of the faith, I feel it is my solemn duty to place on record, can ever claim to be the perfect exemplar of the teachings of Baha'u'lláh or the stainless mirror that reflects his light. So just to summarize, one of the only statements Shoghi Effendi ever puts down on paper about the guardianship is filled from beginning to end with humility about his station, his person, his role, and his responsibilities. In the section of the formative age of the faith, Shoghi Effendi also says a few words about the Universal House of Justice. In the conduct of the administrative affairs of the faith, in the enactment of the legislation necessary to supplement the laws of the Kitabi Akdas, the members of the Universal House of Justice, it should be borne in mind, are not, as Baha'u'llah's utterance clearly imply, responsible to those whom they represent, nor are they allowed to be governed by feelings, the general opinion, and even the convictions of the masses of the faithful, or of those who directly elect them. They're not beholden to the Baha'is, they're not beholden to their feelings, they're not beholden to the NSAs who elect them, they're not beholden to the conviction of the mass of the faithful, so popular opinion. They are just responsible to Baha'u'lláh. I went ahead and made a, let's see, open image in a new tab. So this is the cycles, eras, dispensation, ages, epochs, and ministries. This is something Shoghi Effendi gave us, this organization of ages and cycles. Now, as you see, the Baha'i cycle, Baha'i era, Baha'i dispensation, Babi dispensation, all began in 1844. Before Shoghi Effendi, we did not conceive of Baha'i ages and cycles. We had the Badi calendar with the 19-day feast, the holy days, Nowruz, the intercalary days. But it was Shoghi Effendi who announced the formative age. And the formative age was marked by the administrative order of the faith and would see the birth of the administrative order and the development of the administrative order and the creation of new institutions in that administrative order. But now with the Guardian sort of giving us this organization of time in such a, until the Golden Age, 5,000 centuries from now, Baha'is can now understand the spiritual forces at play in their own codified history, organized in cycles, eras, dispensations, ages and epochs, and ministries. So they understand where they come from, they understand where they're going. And you can download this, it's quite large, you can even print it. The legacy of the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh. Sorry, where was I? This is the most important part of the whole section because the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh holds a very special rank among the letters that the Guardian wrote to the Baha'i world. Ruhiya Hanum makes it abundantly clear how much importance the Guardian placed to the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh. Shoghi Effendi, and this is a quote from Ruhiya Hanum, Shoghi Effendi felt in his inmost heart about his other writings, I know from his remarks that he considered he had said all he had to say in many ways in the dispensation. Shoghi Effendi, and these are pilgrim notes, of course, so take them as you will. But Shoghi Effendi repeatedly told pilgrims that the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh should be regarded as his will and testament. In 1934, Shoghi Effendi's gift to Queen Marie of Romania, the Bananí pilgrimage, and Adasiyyíh. 23 January 1934, the Guardian's gift to Queen Marie of Romania. The Guardian wrote a letter to Queen of Romania, and he gave her a lovely, lovely gift. It was a manuscript in the handwriting of Baha'u'lláh, illumined by a devoted Persian Baha'i in Tehran. And he said, I am presenting to your majesty, through the care of Miss Martha Root, a precious manuscript in the handwriting of Baha'u'lláh. May it serve as a token of my admiration for the spirit that has prompted your majesty to voice such noble sentiments for a struggling and persecuted faith. Now, Musa and Samimi Bananí, the father and mother of Violet Nakhshavani and the parents-in-law of Ali Nakhshavani, come on pilgrimage in 1934. Musa Bananí was illiterate. He was born in Baghdad in 1886. He had become an entrepreneur, and then he became a Baha'i in 1913, and it completely changed him. He married Samihe Rafi Ardistani in 1925, and they had 6 children, including Violet. Musa Bananí was bankrupted when World War I started, and then he rebuilt his fortune, and they went on pilgrimage and spent 26 days in the presence of Shoghi Effendi. And the Guardian immediately perceived the qualities and capacities of Musa Bananí. He loved Musa Bananí's simplicity, directness, unbounded energy, and spiritual potential. And he nurtured these qualities in Musa Bananí very carefully. At the end of their pilgrimage, the Guardian sent them to Egypt to encourage the Baha'is in Cairo, Alexandria, Port Said, and Ismailiyeh. After his pilgrimage, Musa Bananí was deeply enkindled. Being with the Guardian for 26 days had fused the essence of his being, and his ardent devotion to the Guardian would last him until the end of his life. And now I have a really funny story of the wife of Musa Bananí, Samihe Bananí's great-grandmother, falling on Abdu'l-Bahá. Samihe Bananí had an unforgettable experience during her pilgrimage. Abdu'l-Bahá's wife, Munira Hanum, recognized Samihe Bananí and told her a story about her great-grandmother, who for a time had lived in a room in the house of Abud. One day, Samihe's great-grandmother fell down the stairs and landed on Abdu'l-Bahá. And she moved out of the house of Abud because she was so incredibly embarrassed and could not get over it. Samihe just did not want to ask the Guardian about this. I guess she just couldn't find the words to say, did my great-grandmother fall on your grandfather? So what happened was, after they had gone to Bahji, Shoghi Effendi asked Samihe, did you go to Akka? Samihe responded, yes. Did you go to the house of Abud? Yes. Have you been to that room? Yes. Then Shoghi Effendi told Samihe that Abdu'l-Bahá himself had told Shoghi Effendi the story of Samihe's great-grandmother falling down on him. So the story was confirmed. But you know, this is one of the things that the Guardian did. He could, oftentimes pilgrims would say that he just could read their thoughts. These are some of the Baha'is of Adasiyyíh, Abdu'l-Bahá's farming village, standing in front of the orchard. Left to right, Shafiq Ehsan, Haidar Assad Tuza, Robert Gulick, Hussein Tabrizi, Isfandiar Siavushi, Bahram Naimi, David Furudi, Azizullah Furudi. During one of his visits to Adasiyyíh, Abdu'l-Bahá said that he had dedicated the whole of Adasiyyíh as endowments to the shrine of Baha'u'lláh. So each farmer, after the passing of Abdu'l-Bahá, the farmers continued to pay the 20% share to Ziya Khanum and Mirza Hadi Afnan, Shoghi Effendi's parents. Shoghi Effendi told the farmers not to apply for ownership of their own farms. And Mirza Hadi Afnan, Shoghi Effendi's father, also lived in Adasiyyíh and managed a farm there. Shoghi Effendi was very interested in the work of the Baha'i farmers and often recommended that their sons and daughters study agriculture and appropriate methods and techniques of farming. Over the years, Adasiyyíh became a showcase village for Jordan. The government brought foreign guests there. But it also had a very mature Baha'i culture. It had a functioning local spiritual assembly, committees, and a farming committee that regulated seasonal crops and animal husbandry. Shoghi Effendi, like Abdu'l-Bahá, gave advice to the farmers. Isfandiar Siyavushi had left Persia at the age of 12, and Shoghi Effendi advised him to go to Adasiyyíh and settle and become a farmer, and began growing all kinds of vegetables. And they had a long-standing tradition since the days of Abdu'l-Bahá, the farmers of Adasiyyíh, to send vegetables, fruits, and dairy products as gifts whenever they came to visit Shoghi Effendi. So during his ministry, he received fresh vegetables and fruit from Adasiyyíh. April to December 1934, tax exemption for Baha'i properties. This would be very important for Shoghi Effendi. In spring 1934, Corinne True came on pilgrimage. And she was just not shy. She was just a mixture of love and frankness. When she had her first dinner in the pilgrim house, she said, "Shoghi Effendi, you are not eating enough." Shoghi Effendi protested, "But Mrs. True, this is all I want." Corinne True responded, "You need to eat more, for eating only twice a day is not enough." Everybody at the table was incredibly shocked by Corinne True's directness. But they realized after a little bit that the Guardian was just very moved by her concern and her love for him. And, you know, after all, she didn't say anything that the greatest holy leaf hadn't told him a million times. She was always taking him into her room to feed him something, you know. But in fact, the Guardian loved Corinne True so much that she would receive over 70 letters from the Guardian. The Guardian always encouraged Corinne True to write to him, even once telling her in one of his early letters, "I greatly value your views and feelings as they proceed from a heart that is wholly consecrated to his love and mind that thinks of naught but service to his cause." Then after, so let's say, when was this again? Let's see. So really around the same time as Corinne True is on pilgrimage at the World Center, the first National Spiritual Assembly of Persia is elected. This magnificent picture that you see here, beautiful. The Baha'is of Persia had elected a National Spiritual Assembly since 1927, just like the Americans had elected a National Spiritual Assembly since 1922, but the Guardian did not recognize it as a properly and duly elected National Spiritual Assembly according to the letter of Bahá'í law until 1934, when they really filled all the criteria for being a properly elected National Assembly. And so the first members were Waliullah Khan Varka, Shuaullah Khan Alai, Dr. Yunus Khan Afrukte from Memories of 9 Years in Haifa, Jinabi Fazili Mazindarani, Amin, Ahmad Khan Yazdani, Ali Akbar Khan Furutan, Inayatullah Khan Ahmadpur, and Mahmud Khan Badi. May 10th, 1934, tax exemption for Baha'i properties. I'm going to summarize this. The Guardian negotiated quite arduously with the government of British Mandate Palestine. And this man here is Sir Arthur Grenfell Wauchope, the High Commissioner of Palestine. And a year after this man wrote a letter, which he said, I understand that you want tax exemption. I'm going to do my best. He wrote back to Shoghi Effendi, and Shoghi Effendi was able to cable the United States on the 10th of May, 1934, saying, prolonged negotiations, Palestine authorities resulted exemption from taxation entire area surrounding dedicated shrines, Mount Carmel. This was, for Shoghi Effendi, an immense event in the history of the faith. This was, as he says, securing indirect recognition, sacredness, faith, international center. So he wrote back to thank Sir Arthur Wauchope and talked about the Baha'is' great gratitude and appreciation for this event. And this was a huge part of the Guardian's life. He went through enormous tests throughout his guardianship to sign contracts, purchase, exempt from taxes, and safeguard the properties at the Baha'i World Center. He's the reason we have so many properties at the Baha'i World Center. It was just non-stop work for him, on top of dealing with the covenant breakers, dealing with oppression in Turkey and Persia, dealing with the growth of the administrative World Center, translating major works of Baha'u'lláh and letters, and responding to correspondence, and receiving the pilgrims, and taking tea with them, and having dinner with them. I'm kind of a nerd with anything having to do with the specifics of Shoghi Effendi's writings. And I want to introduce you to the Guardian's dictionary. The Guardian's favorite dictionary was the Webster's New International Dictionary of the English language, 2nd edition, published in 1934. It was a really big, a really heavy volume, and he referred to it often, and he often asked Ruhiya Khanum to bring it to him when he needed it. Although the Guardian had a perfect command of English, he really liked to use the 2nd or 3rd or 4th meaning of a word, at times bordering on the archaic. The Webster's 2nd edition had 600,000 entries. It was 3,350 pages long. It was sold for $39.50, $900 today. The Webster's also had gorgeous illustrations throughout. Some versions added a supplement called a Reference History of the World, which provided chronologies, which of course I would like, of the ancient history to the present. It is unknown if the Guardian had this supplement in his dictionary. The feature the Guardian loved so much was the Webster's provided multiple definitions for each word, in chronological order from the most ancient to the most recent. As an example, the first definition of the word starve includes dying of exposure to the elements as well as lack of food. This is an example of a word's 4th meaning. In God Passes By, when relating the Bab's address to the vast multitudes of the Persians of Tabriz about to watch him be shot and martyred, the Guardian translates the original Persian with a very archaic, seldom used word. He says, "O wayward generation, had you believed in me, every one of you would have followed the example of this youth." Wayward itself does not show up in Webster's New International Dictionary. However, it is listed as the 4th definition of the word naughty, which reads mischievous, wayward. This is the meaning in which Shoghi Effendi used, "O wayward generation," guilty of disobedience or misbehavior, now chiefly applied to children or in playful censure. But wayward is the 4th definition synonym of the word naughty that he chooses to use because it's guilty of disobedience. And that perfectly describes, "O wayward generation." I'm going to skip this. This is a review of somebody we don't know who is not a Baha'i about how amazing this dictionary is. I did a little excess zeal by putting this in the chronology. It doesn't really belong in here, but anyway, I got excited about the dictionary. So what can you say? Dictionaries and donkeys. 6 December 1934, the Tarbiyat Boys and Girls School. This is the Tarbiyat Boys and Girls School in Tehran in 1911. On 6 December 1934, the Minister of Education closed the Tarbiyat Baha'i School in Tehran and 19 other schools. The Guardian immediately cabled, has Tarbiyat School been permanently closed? The Persians wrote, the Persian National Assembly replied basically yes. And then the next day, the Guardian had to cable the United States and Canada, apprising them of the horrifying situation in Persia, where the Baha'i community was experiencing new persecution. And this is just another example of the Guardian using every avenue to attempt and gain more freedom for the Persian Baha'is. And we're going to finish today with the story of Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'lláh. This is the word gleaning from the Oxford English Dictionary. It is it's just my illustration for this. The project of Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'lláh was not a straight translation of any work of Baha'u'lláh. It was a careful selection of 165 excerpts, thematically organized from writings of Baha'u'lláh chosen by the Guardian, some from deeply, deeply obscure tablets for which the only existing translation is the paragraph or paragraphs that are in Gleanings. It went from parts of the Kitabi Akdas were translated there, and the House of Justice used those as a basis for the language for their translation of the Kitabi Akdas. This is how the Guardian described Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'lláh, a befitting and authoritative rendering of the fundamental teachings of the cause regarding God, soul, creation, the nature of divine manifestation, and similar subjects. Shoghi Effendi sent Gleanings to George Townsend, his constant help and aid in his Englishing of the Guardian's perfect translations, very minute changes that he would made. George Townsend returned the pages finally on the 8th of May, 1935, calling attention to the Guardian's attention to the fact he felt the English translation had such a special force and beauty, he was compelled not to change it, although he did make very minor editorial changes. Shoghi Effendi published this timeless bouquet of writings of Baha'u'lláh in 1935, and it has now found its way into all of our hearts. And for many of us, it is the volume that we turn to read the writings of Baha'u'lláh every morning and evening. I'm going to skip the compliments everybody paid Shoghi Effendi about how amazing, how great, how wonderful, how important, how special, how beautifully translated, how it never reads like a translation, because I want you to go to my chronology and read them for yourself. Also, we're out of time. And these are the 55 subjects that are covered in Gleanings. I'm just going to give you a taste. Refutations of attacks on the cause, prophets as divine physicians, justice in the Baha'i teachings, the unity of God, the unity of prophets, Isaiah's prophecy, tablet of fasting, the meaning of divine unity, the station of a true believer, relations of the Babi and Baha'i faith, identity of the Bab and Baha'u'lláh, divine revelation is progressive, the station of Christ and significance of his crucifixion. You can go and paste this into a document, and you will find, if you read carefully the Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'lláh, you will notice that they follow each other in chronological order. An excerpt from Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'lláh. This story was written by my dear friend and collaborator, Adib Masumian, provisional translator of the writings of Baha'u'lláh from Arabic and Persian into English. These are his words. An exceptional example of Shoghi Effendi's mastery of both translation and interpretation from the Arabic and Persian into English is Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'lláh, number 99. It's in Roman numerals. Apologize. Which begins, "The vitality of men's belief in God is dying out in every land." On its own, the English never reads like a translation, but rather as if it was revealed directly by Baha'u'lláh in English. But in order to produce such an elegant translation, it's important to remember there's at least two major factors that work in combination: Shoghi Effendi's mastery of English and his unerring interpretation of the writings from their original Persian Arabic into English. The vitality of man's belief is dying out in every land. Where the former is concerned, this particular sentence in the excerpt below reads so beautifully. "It is within human power, O Hakim, to effect in the constituent elements of the minute and indivisible particles of matter so complete a transformation as to transmute it into purest gold." As an example, Adib shares what the literal translation of these two things are. The vitality of men's belief is dying out in every land. Literally in Persian or Arabic, it says the strength and ability of belief are weakening in the regions of the world. The vitality of men's belief in God is dying out in every land. It's got a wonderful rhythm and it's just eloquent. Okay, so this is Effie Baker, the photographer of the Dawnbreakers. She is now gone back to Australia. She leaves Australia finally after many years of service. Shoghi Effendi writes The Unfoldment of Divine Civilization. I am out of time. I will not be able to cover this letter. And the Baha'is attend the World Congress of Faiths in 1936. And the Baha'is presented a paper on Baha'u'llah's ground plan for world fellowship. So this is important because the Baha'is are participating in interfaith gatherings and they're gaining recognition on the world stage. But there's much more to the story, which again, you can find on the chronology. Now, I just want to very quickly tell you, next week, I'm so excited. This is one of my favorite parts. Part 11, 1937 to 1938, Shoghi Effendi's marriage to Ruhiyyah Khanum. Come, one and all, tell your friends. This is a wonderful story. Now I'm just going to thank you very much. Thank you to Clearwater, and apologies this was so long today.